What would you do if your own father erased you in front of 600 of the most powerful people in your industry? The chandeliers were blinding, crystal reflecting off polished marble. Cameras flashing so fast it felt like lightning lived inside the ballroom. The annual National Infrastructure Awards, the biggest night of the year in commercial construction. Every major contractor, every investor, every bank that mattered. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. And my father was on stage. Miguel Valles, 63, founder of Valles Infrastructure Group, a $480 million a year company he built from a single backhoe and a rented trailer 42 years ago. He adjusted the microphone. The future of this company, he said, pausing just long enough for drama, is my son. The applause started before he even said Daniel's name. Daniel Valles, 29, MBA. Charismatic. Well-dressed. 2 years in strategy. My older brother stood up from his seat at the VIP table. Confident smile. Shook hands on his way to the stage. Then my father looked directly at me. This industry, he continued, voice steady, isn't for women. The crowd applauded. Not awkwardly. Not hesitantly. Enthusiastically. And the cameras turned toward me. 10 years. 10 years of 5 a.m. site visits in steel-toed boots. 10 years of negotiating municipal contracts in rooms where I was the only woman at the table. 10 years earning my civil engineering degree, then my MBA at night while running operations during the day. I had closed our largest deal, a $90 million transportation contract, at 31. I was Chief Operating Officer. I had prepared to lead this company since I was 14. And in one sentence, my father rewrote the future. So what did I do? I smiled. Not a trembling smile. Not a hurt smile. A controlled one. Because here's the part no one in that ballroom understood. This didn't surprise me. It should have. But it didn't. A month earlier, I had been quietly removed from 3 executive meetings. Meetings I normally led. When I asked Daniel about it, he said, Dad wants to streamline communication. Streamline. Interesting word. Then the CFO, Priya Rao, 45, sharp-eyed and unshakable, pulled me aside one evening after a budget review. Have you noticed, she asked carefully, that Daniel's been sitting in on all lender calls? I had noticed. I just hadn't wanted to connect the dots. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt the shift before anyone said it out loud? That subtle current change in a room? The way people stop making eye contact when something's coming? That was the month before the awards. Still, I told myself logic would win. I had the operational record. Daniel didn't. I had relationships with our top 5 clients, representing 62% of annual revenue. Daniel didn't. I had negotiated our supplier agreements, restructured our procurement model, increased margins by 3.8% over 4 years. Daniel had PowerPoint slides. So when my father stepped on that stage, I assumed, even if it wasn't official, everyone knew who had earned it. But here's something most people don't understand about family businesses. They're not democracies. They're kingdoms. And kings don't always choose the most qualified heir. Sometimes they choose the most familiar one. When my father said, "This industry isn't for women," it wasn't anger in his voice. It was certainty. And certainty is harder to fight than prejudice. The applause echoed longer than it should have. Daniel reached the stage and hugged him. Cameras flashing. Industry bloggers already typing headlines. Legacy secured. Valles dynasty continues. No one typed my name. I felt 600 pairs of eyes waiting for a reaction. Waiting for me to look devastated. Or furious. Or humiliated. Instead, I crossed my legs. Smoothed my dress. And smiled. Because arguing in that moment would have done one thing. Confirmed their belief. So I let Daniel have the spotlight. Let my father have his declaration. But inside, something shifted. Not heartbreak. Not rage. Calculation. You see, companies don't survive on applause. They survive on cash flow. On debt ratios. On margins. On execution. And I knew something most of that ballroom didn't. Daniel had never managed a full-cycle infrastructure project. He had never handled a supplier default. He had never sat across from a union rep during a strike threat. He had never carried payroll anxiety for 1,200 employees. I had. The applause died down. Dinner resumed. Laughter floated through the ballroom like nothing seismic had just happened. But something had. A line had been drawn publicly. And once something is said in public, it has to be proven in private. As the night ended, Daniel leaned toward me. "No hard feelings, right?" he said lightly. I smiled again. Of course not. But here's the part no one knew. 6 months earlier, Daniel had pushed for an aggressive expansion into high-risk urban redevelopment projects. Projects dependent on fluctuating steel prices and short-term financing. My father approved them. I advised caution. They called it hesitation. And as I watched Daniel pose for photos with the award behind him, one question kept circling in my mind. What happens when confidence meets consequences? Because leadership isn't tested at award shows. It's tested when numbers start bleeding. And 1 year later, the board made an announcement. They thought I was defeated. I was auditing everything. The morning after the awards, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from industry peers, former mentors, even competitors. "Are you okay? That must have been tough. You deserved it." Sympathy is interesting. It sounds kind. But underneath, it assumes the story is over. It wasn't. I showed up to headquarters at 6:15 a.m. like always. Same glass building. Same security guard. Same executive floor. Except Daniel's name was now on the corner office. CEO. He walked in at 8:30. New suit. New confidence. Same handshake. "We're going to take this company to the next level," he told the leadership team that morning. Aggressive expansion. Bigger projects. Higher visibility. Applause around the conference table. I watched quietly. Here's something most people don't realize about corporate power shifts. Titles change overnight. Influence doesn't. For the first few weeks, Daniel rode momentum. He scheduled interviews. Updated branding. Announced a bold strategic vision focused on urban redevelopment, high-rise, mixed-use projects in 3 major cities. On paper, it looked ambitious. In practice, it was expensive. Our industry runs on tight margins. Average net profit across U.S. commercial construction hovers between 5 and 10% in a strong year. Material volatility can wipe that out fast. Steel prices had already climbed 11% that quarter. Interest rates were creeping upward. And Daniel wanted leverage. He secured 2 short-term credit facilities to finance a $60 million redevelopment project in Rivergate City. Luxury residential towers. Retail ground floor. Completion timeline, 26 months. I remember sitting in that meeting. "Have we locked in material contracts?" I asked. "We'll hedge," he replied casually. Hedge? As if volatility were theoretical. Let me ask you something. Would you bet your entire company on stable steel prices in an unstable economy? Because that's essentially what we were doing. Over the next 3 months, I noticed patterns. Vendor payments stretching from 30 days to 45. Cash reserves dipping below our historical buffer. Debt-to-equity ratio climbing from 1.4 to 2.1. Not catastrophic. Yet, I scheduled a private review with Priya, our CFO. She didn't sugarcoat it. "He's assuming everything goes right," she said, sliding spreadsheets across the table. But construction punishes optimism. We both knew that. Still, I didn't confront Daniel publicly. Why? Because timing matters. If I challenged him too early, it would look like resentment. A sore loser undermining her brother. So instead, I did something quieter. I called our top 5 clients. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Just relationship maintenance. "How's everything looking on your end? Anything we can improve?" Subtle reassurance. And something interesting happened. 3 of them said the same thing. "We trust you, Elena." Not the company. Me. Trust is currency. And Daniel didn't even realize he was spending it. 6 months in, the first crack appeared. Steel prices spiked 18% after international supply disruptions. Our Rivergate projections hadn't locked pricing. That $60 million budget? Now forecasted at $71 million. $11 million over before we were halfway through phase 1. Daniel called an emergency meeting. It's temporary, he insisted. Markets fluctuate. Yes, they do. But loan agreements don't fluctuate. Penalty clauses don't fluctuate. Cash flow doesn't fluctuate kindly. I presented a mitigation plan. Adjust phasing. Renegotiate supplier contracts. Slow secondary expansion into the Westbrook development he'd just greenlit. He shook his head. Pulling back signals weakness. No. Ignoring gravity signals denial. But I didn't argue. Instead, I documented everything. Every forecast revision. Every delayed payment. Every risk memo I submitted. Because here's a question for you. When leadership fails, who does the board listen to? The one who spoke the loudest? Or the one who predicted it? By month 8, margins had compressed dangerously. The Rivergate overrun combined with early-stage costs on Westbrook pushed projected annual losses to $14 million. Not fatal, but bleeding. And bleeding attracts attention. Banks began requesting updated liquidity reports bi-weekly instead of monthly. Suppliers shortened credit terms. Even Harold Whitman, our 71-year-old board chair and longtime loyalist to my father, started asking sharper questions. Meanwhile, publicly, Daniel was still celebrated. Industry panels. Magazine features. Young visionary CEO. Optics are powerful, but numbers are patient. Then came the call that changed everything. It was 7:40 p.m. I was still at my desk reviewing subcontractor bids when my direct line rang. It was Thomas Green, CEO of Metro Transit Authority, our largest client. The $120 million municipal contract I had negotiated 3 years earlier. Elena, he said without preamble, I need to ask you something directly. Is your company stable? Stable. Not successful. Not innovative. Stable. I chose my words carefully. We're navigating expansion, I said. But operationally, our projects are on track. A pause. We trust you, he replied. But our board is nervous about your brother. There it was. The first external tremor. After we hung up, I leaned back in my chair. Because now it wasn't internal disagreement. It was reputation risk. And reputation risk spreads faster than financial loss. That night, I opened a new folder on my laptop. Title, Contingency. Inside, I began building something Daniel didn't know existed. A full recovery framework. Asset divestment options. Debt restructuring pathways. Leadership realignment scenarios. I wasn't hoping he'd fail. But I was preparing for what would happen if he did. And 3 weeks later, the steel supplier did something no one expected. They pulled our credit line. But what that triggered would push the company to the edge. And force a decision no one was ready to make. It wasn't sabotage. It was gravity. When the steel supplier pulled our credit line, it didn't make headlines. There was no dramatic press release. No flashing red warnings across financial news. It was just an email. Subject line, revised terms effective immediately. Net, 60 payment terms reduced to net 15. Outstanding balances to be settled within 10 business days. In construction, that's not a minor inconvenience. That's oxygen being cut off. I was in Priya's office when she read it. She didn't panic. She just exhaled slowly and said, "This accelerates everything." And she was right. Because here's what most people don't understand about leveraged expansion. When one supplier tightens, others follow. Risk spreads socially before it spreads financially. Within 2 weeks, 2 secondary vendors shortened terms. Our liquidity buffer, once strong enough to handle 3 months of disruption, shrank to 6 weeks. Daniel called an executive meeting. "We can float this," he insisted. "It's a negotiation tactic." Negotiation tactic? Steel doesn't negotiate. Banks don't negotiate when covenants are breached. Reality doesn't negotiate. Let me ask you something. If your debt-to-equity ratio climbs past 2.5 in a volatile market, do you double down? Because that's what Daniel did. Instead of slowing Westbrook development, he accelerated marketing for pre-leases, hoping early commitments would reassure lenders. Optics again. Always optics. But internally, projections were shifting fast. Rivergate overruns climbed from $11 million to $18 million as labor costs increased 7% mid-contract. Westbrook required additional site remediation after unexpected soil contamination, another $6 million unplanned. By month 9, projected annual losses weren't $14 million anymore. They were $38 million. 38. On a company with average annual net profits of $42 to $48 million. One bad year could wipe out a decade of steady growth. Banks noticed. Our primary lender requested a covenant compliance review. If we breached thresholds, they could demand accelerated repayment. That's corporate language for collapse. I requested time on the board agenda. Harold Whitman looked tired when I entered the room. Keep it concise, he said. I didn't dramatize. I didn't accuse. I presented numbers. Debt exposure. Margin compression. Cash runway. 74 days under current burn rate. What's your recommendation? One board member asked. Pause. Pause, Westbrook, I said. Divest 2 non-core land assets. Renegotiate Rivergate phases. Stabilize before expansion. Miguel leaned forward. You're suggesting retreat. I'm suggesting survival. Silence. Daniel cut in. Market volatility is temporary. If we pull back now, competitors win. Competitors win? We were competing with insolvency. The board table divided subtly. For members exchanged glances. 2 avoided eye contact. Harold remained neutral. And Miguel? He chose his son. We stay the course, he said firmly. Decision made. But something changed in that room. Doubt had entered. Publicly, Daniel maintained composure. He appeared on an industry podcast talking about navigating macroeconomic headwinds. Internally, payroll conversations grew tense. At month 10, something else happened. Metro Transit Authority delayed awarding a contract extension. Unofficially, I heard why. They were concerned about execution risk. Execution risk. The polite phrase for, we're not sure you'll finish what you start. Our private equity stakeholders began quietly marking down valuation. Internal share value dropped 22%. No one announced it. But executives felt it. Miguel began staying later at the office. I noticed the way his shoulders slumped when he thought no one was looking. Pride is heavy when it starts cracking. Then came the night everything tilted. It was 11:20 p.m. My phone rang. Priya. Elena, she said, voice steady but tight. We have a problem. Primary lender flagged a technical covenant breach based on revised forecasts. If formally declared, they could freeze credit access. Cash runway now, 41 days. 41. The next morning, Miguel didn't show up. Stress-induced cardiac episode. Not catastrophic, but serious enough for hospitalization. The board called an emergency meeting. Daniel was expected to present a recovery strategy. He didn't have one. That afternoon, he knocked on my office door. No confidence this time. No polished CEO posture. Just Daniel. I need your help, he said quietly. 3 words. Let that sink in. The same brother who stood on stage while 600 executives applauded my exclusion was now standing in my doorway asking for guidance. What would you do? Would you savor it? Would you refuse? Would you rescue the company anyway? Because here's the truth no one likes to admit. When family businesses fall, they don't just lose money. They lose legacy. And despite everything, this company was still my life's work. Daniel sat down across from me. It's worse than they know, he admitted. True projections show $52 million in losses if we don't restructure immediately. $52 million. That wasn't miscalculation anymore. That was collapse territory. And Dad? I asked. He thinks we can ride it out. Ride it out. Like this was weather. It wasn't weather. It was structural failure. I closed my laptop slowly. Because in that moment, something became clear. Power hadn't shifted publicly yet. But privately? It already had. And the next 24 hours would determine who actually led Vala's infrastructure group. But what I asked for in exchange would change the balance forever, and Daniel had no idea what he was about to agree to. Leadership isn't given. It's taken in silence. The emergency board meeting was set for 9 a.m. sharp. The room smelled of polished oak and stale coffee, the kind you only get from executive suites where stress and authority collide. I arrived 15 minutes early. Daniel had already claimed a seat, looking smaller than he had on the award stage. Confidence evaporates quickly when numbers start screaming. "Morning," I said, sliding into my chair. No smiles. No theatrics. Just focus. The board filed in slowly. Harold Whitman presiding. Miguel still in the hospital, resting under strict doctor orders. The tension was palpable. Everyone knew why we were there. Vala's infrastructure group was hemorrhaging cash, credibility, and potentially its future. I opened my laptop. I had prepared 18 slides for this meeting, meticulously detailing the path to survival and eventual growth. Each point carefully laid to avoid looking like criticism of Daniel, while subtly highlighting my operational record over the past year. Slide 1, Cash Flow Projections. Slide 2, Rivergate Risk Mitigation. Slide 3, Westbrook Phasing Strategy. Slide 4, Long-Term Contracts, Stabilization Plan. The numbers told a story Daniel couldn't. 1 year of preparation, 1 year of quiet leadership while he held the title. I began. "Gentlemen, ladies, what we're facing isn't temporary volatility. It's structural overextension. If we don't act, we risk losses exceeding $50 million by year-end. That's not speculation. That's projection." I paused, eyes scanning the room. The old guard. Investors. Advisors. My father's allies. Some skeptical. Some curious. Some silently calculating their own exposure. Slide 10. Proposed measures. Pause Westbrook expansion immediately. Divest 2 non-core land assets. Renegotiate Rivergate phases with suppliers. Restore client confidence with direct engagement. Reallocate interim leadership responsibilities to stabilize operations. I could see the murmurs. Board members whispering. Even Daniel leaned forward, gripping the table. Priya spoke next. Her voice calm, precise. "Elena has been running operational stability for the past year. These recommendations aren't theoretical. They're proven by her execution." At that moment, the room shifted. The energy changed from confrontation to recognition. Daniel swallowed hard. I think I underestimated the exposure," he admitted. Audience question. Have you ever watched someone who publicly outshone you finally admit they can't carry the weight? Silence hung. Then the motion for an interim CEO vote was proposed. This wasn't symbolic. It would determine who truly led the company. The vote was painstakingly slow. Harold called each member in turn. 5-4 in favor. Interim CEO, Elena Valles. Daniel's shoulders slumped. He nodded. No argument. No theatrics. Just acceptance. Victory? Not yet. There was still one more obstacle, Miguel. The hospital room was quiet. The beeping of monitors punctuated the tension. Miguel's eyes opened slowly. I pulled up a chair. "If you fail, it's on you," he said simply. No anger. No prideful bluster. Just certainty and challenge. And I understood him perfectly. This wasn't about proving him wrong. This was about survival. About results. About the company itself. Fast forward 12 months. The company stabilized. Debt reduced by 40%. 2 major municipal contracts secured. Profit margin restored to 9.2%. Public perception? Quietly flawless. Investors never panicked. Competitors underestimated us again. Annual industry awards, same ballroom. Chandeliers, cameras, and applause. Same faces. But this time, I wasn't in the shadows. Board Chair Harold stepped up. The permanent CEO of Vala's infrastructure group. He paused, letting tension build. Elena Valles. The room erupted. The cameras turned. Flashbulbs exploded. For a moment, I let them see me. Not a smirk. Not a gloat. Just calm recognition. Miguel sat in the audience. Slow clap. Not emotional. Not proud. Just acknowledgement. And then, a private moment. Daniel approached. "You were always better at this," he said softly. No revenge. No bitterness. Just honesty. Just a shift in hierarchy. The smile I gave the crowd that night, the same one from the awards a year ago, finally made sense. That smile wasn't about victory over others. It was about quiet mastery, preparation, and patience. Have you ever been underestimated? Did it make you angry or did it make you patient? Because here's the truth. The world rarely changes in your favor overnight. But results? They speak louder than applause. If someone tells you you don't belong, don't argue. Build. Prepare. Execute. Let your work speak when the room is quiet. They said this industry wasn't for women. They were right. It wasn't. Until I let it. The room smelled the same. Polished oak. Faint coffee. A tinge of leather from chairs that had seen decades of executive drama. But nothing about the atmosphere felt familiar. Not really. Because this time, I wasn't a bystander. I wasn't the overlooked daughter. I was the one they were waiting to see. It had been exactly 1 year since that awards night when my father's words, "This industry isn't for women," rang through the chandeliers and cameras. I remembered the applause, the pointed glance, my brother standing confidently in the spotlight. 10 years of preparation, 1 sentence of public dismissal. And yet, here I was. The board had gathered, Harold Whitman at the helm. Miguel was in the audience, older, slower, but present. Daniel had taken a seat beside him, silent. I took a deep breath. Every step I had taken in the past year, auditing every project, restructuring debt, stabilizing cash flow, and quietly rebuilding client trust, led to this moment. The chair of the board began the announcement. The permanent CEO of Valles Infrastructure Group, Elena Valles. The applause erupted, louder than anything I had imagined. But I didn't react with emotion. Not yet. I let the moment settle in. Cameras flashing. Executives nodding. Competitors whispering. Journalists already scribbling headlines about the youngest female CEO of a major infrastructure company. Miguel leaned forward from the audience. His slow clap was deliberate, unadorned, precise. No tears. No proud smile. Just acknowledgement. It was the kind of recognition that carries more weight than praise, the kind that says, "You earned this. On your terms." Daniel came toward me afterward. He stopped a few feet away, his posture stiff, eyes not hiding the realization he had come to. "You were always better at this," he said quietly. No resentment. No need for validation. Just honesty. I nodded. And I understood something crucial. Leadership isn't about winning applause. It isn't about titles or speeches. It's about preparation, patience, and results. I didn't need to argue in front of 600 people. I didn't need to confront my father publicly. I built. I waited. I executed. And when the time came, the results spoke for themselves. 1 year had taught me more than 10 years of preparation. The silent year, the one where I was excluded, underestimated, and publicly dismissed, became my crucible. Every spreadsheet I analyzed, every client I reassured, every risk I calculated quietly in the background, it all compounded. And while the world applauded Daniel, I had been quietly building the foundation to take the helm. I remembered that call from Metro Transit Authority. "We trust you, Elena." They didn't trust my brother. They trusted me. Trust isn't earned in a day. It's earned when decisions survive pressure, when judgment proves accurate, and when results speak louder than rhetoric. And here's something I want you to consider. Life will often place you in situations where your efforts go unnoticed. Where doors close. Where people, even family, question your place. It's tempting to fight publicly. To argue. To try and convince others of your worth. But real power, real leadership, often moves in silence. It prepares. It positions. It executes when the moment is right. That night, as I stood at the podium addressing the same audience that had witnessed my public dismissal a year ago, I felt the irony fully. They had told me I didn't belong. They had set the stage for someone else. They had underestimated me. And yet, here I was, leading the very company they doubted could survive without their traditional expectations. I looked at my team. Priya Rao, steadfast as ever, nodded slightly. The executives I had worked quietly to stabilize smiled subtly. They had seen my work. They had seen results. They had trusted the one person who never wavered. I thought about the audience watching at home, the people scrolling through headlines, the young women in this industry, perhaps doubting themselves right now, wondering if persistence was enough. Let me tell you this, it is. Persistence paired with strategy is unstoppable. Patience paired with preparation is invincible. And if you combine both with a relentless focus on results, even public dismissal becomes irrelevant. I remembered my smile that night at the awards. It wasn't smug. It wasn't victorious in a superficial sense. It was knowing. Quiet mastery. Power doesn't argue in public. It waits. It builds. And it executes when the time is right. That smile came full circle tonight. And now I shared it not for applause but as proof. Proof that being underestimated is sometimes the most valuable advantage you can have. The industry murmured, flashes of cameras reflected in the crystal chandeliers. But I stood still, grounded. Leadership is not a spectacle, it is responsibility. It is results. And it is patience. 1 year later, Vala's infrastructure group was no longer defined by tradition or gendered expectations. It was defined by competence, strategy, and resilience. And I, Elena Valas, was at the helm. If someone tells you you don't belong, don't argue. Build. Prepare. Execute. Let your results speak when the room is quiet. Let your perseverance rewrite expectations. Because sometimes, the very thing meant to diminish you, the public humiliation, the doubt, the exclusion, becomes the fuel that propels you to the top. They said this industry wasn't for women. They were right. It wasn't. Until I let it.